Y'all get ready?
Yes, you get ready.
If you want the latest news in the streets, join us and tune in for the tea. Breaking news with integrity. So tell your friends and your family. It's the Lovelyti TV show, bringing you good tea and good vibes. It's the Lovelyti TV show. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Hey tea sippers, I hope you guys are doing good today. Make sure you guys have your teacups ready because this tea is what? Piping hot. So one of my favorite things to do, especially when I'm live streaming, is talking about nostalgic stuff and talking about, back in my day. But today in this video, we're not just going to talk about nostalgia. We're also going to talk about programming. Because right now, with the Epstein files leaking, a lot of us are looking back at the 90s and the early 2000s. And even though we say that was the best era, because the music was fire, the fashion was iconic, TRL and 106 in Park was our show after school. Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, ABC morning cartoons on Saturday mornings. We had Snick at Night with All That, Are You Afraid of the Dark, and many other shows on Nickelodeon. And then as the 2000s came in, we had fashion like Juicy Couture, Baby Fat, Rockwear, and Nietzsche, low-rise jeans. It was such an iconic time back then. But here's the uncomfortable question that we kind of have to wrestle with when we have a lot of this nostalgia. What if we weren't just being entertained? What if we were technically being groomed? And I'm not saying that in like a conspiracy tinfoil hat type of way. And I know many people in the comment section will say, T, you're reaching once again. But let me go ahead and break this down to y'all in this video. I think that we were all groomed. It was not in a fast, dramatic way, but it was in a slow, strategic, cultural normalization type way. Because when you zoom out and you look at everything in context, back then there was a lot of hypersexualization. There were sex tapes, modeling pipelines, child star scandals. And so once you start putting this together, everything starts looking less and less random, and it starts being more and more coordinated. So let's start with the obvious. In the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of teenage girls were marketed as sexual fantasies. I still remember Britney Spears debuting in her sexy schoolgirl outfit at 16, and everybody wanted to look like Britney. Everybody wanted the outfit, the pigtails, get this Lolita-esque type fashion thing. But as kids, we just thought it was cute. We all wanted the little skirts, with the cardigan and everything else. And when you think about it, TRL counted down music videos filled with barely 18-year-old aesthetic. Stores like the Limited 2 targeted 8 to 12-year-olds, but the adult fashion industry was pushing low-rise jeans, visible thongs, and words across the butt, and push-up bras for middle schoolers. I definitely remember being in junior high in 8th grade and wearing a push-up bra, okay? And then let's talk about some of the music. We had songs like Too Close by Next, which is one of my favorite groups. Shout out to Minneapolis. They're from my hometown. But that song was literally a song about feeling aroused by a girl dancing on you in the club. And a lot of us were singing it, dancing to it, grinding, and everything else before we understood the context of that song. And I know I had a conversation a few weeks ago about how a lot of Millennials, Gen X, and millennials, older millennials, dance like strippers. And I never really understood why, but looking back on it and doing this research, a lot of it was in the music. A lot of our music was winding and grinding. We didn't really do the whole twerking thing back then. A lot of us were groomed to have this stripper aesthetic and dance like strippers on guys. So it's very interesting, like I say, when you go to a club and you see how millennials and Gen X dance versus what Gen Z does on the dance floor. Like on the dance floor, Gen Zs don't even mingle with each other, the guys and the girls. It's very rare. The girls are literally in their corner. They have their cell phone set up and they're twerking for TikTok and Instagram. The guys are all sitting there watching. But when you see older millennials and Gen X, the guys come up and they grab you. They pick who they want to dance with, and you dance on the guy and you have a good time. You dance like no one's watching. And this, my good people, is why us millennials dance like strippers. We watched Save the Last Dance over and over. We copied a lot of Nicki's moves. This is literally how I still dance till this day. Unlike Gen Z, who just sits around and watches each other and don't mingle.
When you go to a Gen Z club, someone please teach them how to dance.
That was always our saying back in the day. Dance like no one's watching, and that's what we did. We didn't care about phones and being filmed or if we looked silly. We were just there to have a good time. So I believe a lot of the music back then definitely played into how we danced and how sensual we were as young people. And it still plays on us today, how we dance in the club and at, events versus Gen Z.
If you feeling joy, put your hands in the air. Hands up. Yes, suddenly we all got our hands up.
We put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us.
Everybody hands go up, and they stay there, and they say yeah. So I put my hands up to play my song, the butterflies fly away.
And as all this was being normalized to us on places like MTV, BET, and reality television, there also started to emerge teen clubs. And in a lot of these teen clubs, you could get in starting at 14, but the average age for teen clubs around the country was 16.
What we used to do as teenagers and preteens growing up. And she doesn't believe me that we actually, millennials, we had teen clubs. We had teen clubs that we used to go to. You had to be in middle school or high school. And I think it was just for teens. I'm not crazy. She thinks I'm lying. Ours was called Oasis, and there was another one called Uptown. And I promise you, in 6th grade through about maybe early 9th grade, I was going to the club every Friday night with a bunch of teenagers. Of course, they only sold us like Fruitopia and like juice and chips and candy and stuff. But it's a real thing, and I want her to see. I'm going to send this video to her with the comments, and she's going to see that I'm not the only one who was, 13 through 15, 16, going to teen clubs. It's a real thing. It used to exist.
So now let's talk about this shift. Around 2003, Paris Hilton's sex tape leaked, and the media framed her as wild, rebellious, and edgy. And exactly 1 year later, Kim Kardashian decided to follow her same strategy, and her and Ray J filmed theirs. Two wealthy women from powerful circles launching brands off of scandals. That changed everything. Suddenly, sex on camera wasn't shameful. It was a marketing strategy. Then it goes even deeper than that. Let's not forget Farrah Abraham from Teen Mom, which was a show about teen mothers, also released her own porn tape, and it was called Backdoor Teen. Imagine releasing a porn tape and it has the word teen in there. None of this stuff is by accident or happenstance. So let's also get deeper with this. Around the 2010s, we started noticing that a lot of famous celebrity fathers, their daughters were entering the porn industry, which made no sense because when you think about people entering porn, it's usually girls from poorer backgrounds, the trailer park, the hood, the projects. They're struggling, they're trying to make ends meet. But here comes Montana Fishburne, who is the daughter of Lawrence Fishburne, and she entered the porn industry intentionally, saying she wanted to follow the Kardashian path to fame.
We are two separate people, and I think because he's had such a long, successful career and he is so respected, my action should have nothing to do with him.
Along with Montana, let's also not forget Steven Spielberg has a biracial daughter named Michaela Spielberg, and she also announced that she was entering adult film as well. So now ask yourself this. These are two daughters of Hollywood elites. They're financially secure, they're connected, they're protected. Why does the path for so many of these women who already have money, like Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, Montana Fishburne, Michaela Spielberg, Farrah Abraham, and so many others, why does their path always lead them to sex work? It basically was sending the message that if they can do it, then there's nothing wrong with it and it must be normal. If children of the elite can normalize sex on camera and being free with your body, quote unquote, and there not being any consequences, then it ends up trickling down to younger girls, and younger girls don't see anything wrong with it. So it's very interesting how porn ended up being glamorized for a whole generation of girls. So now let's go ahead and fast forward to the modeling industry. There's been a lot of whispers about the modeling industry for years. Agencies purposely scouted 13-year-olds. They felt like 13 was the ideal age to get into modeling because you only had so many years.
She's only 15 years old and is the toast of the international high fashion world. And this gorgeous 6-foot-tall model leads a double life. Part of the time, she's that real-life Cinderella who dresses up for the ball. But back home in St. Louis, Missouri, she's 10th grade student Kimora Perkins.
The gorgeous gown, it's easy to get wrapped up in it. But no, it didn't overtake me because I knew I still had to take off the gown and come home and go back to school. So it was easy to keep my feet on the ground.
Kimora spends 12 weeks out of the school year away from home, working in Europe and New York for the likes of Chanel and Yves Saint Laurent. Although she won't turn 16 until next May, she's remarkably mature and says that she's able to keep her distance from the darker undersides of her seemingly glamorous profession.
People get caught up on mental and psychological trips when they get into things like and all, and they're dating people to get certain places. And some people get really confused as to why they're there. There's a lot of things like that going on. Do this will make you better, this will make you prettier, this will make you feel good, and when you're stressed out, drink this will make you feel, oh God, you have to really watch out for that.
Wild and sensual nightlife of Paris might be tempting to a young teenaged girl from the heart of the American Midwest, St. Louis. But Kimora says that she's been able to steer clear of older men who can be considered model groupies.
They don't know how old I am when they approach me. I'm not a 19-year-old, 21-year-old person. And I have men that are 40 years old that want to take me out to dinner, and it's just not something that I need to be seen even in right now.
Kimora is of Korean, Japanese, and African-American descent. Her career began when she was discovered by a European modeling agent when she was 13 and flown off to France. When she's in Paris, she lives alone in her own apartment because her mother has a job and cannot travel with her. And this 15-year-old earns up to $450 an hour.
Angle one, the ending to your right angle is 14.
But when she's home in St. Louis, she's just like any other high school sophomore, except that she says some of her schoolmates don't quite understand what she does.
A lot of kids are jealous of me and they're envious of me, but it may not be because they want to do what I'm doing or something like that, or they want what I have. It's more like they don't understand what I'm doing.
Kimora was raised as an only child in a single-parent home. Her mother, Joanne Perkins, says it was hard to send her daughter off alone to Europe.
She realized how painful it was for me to let her go and how important it was for her to do well, that it was a sacrifice.
Kimora loves living in St. Louis and plans to always keep it her home. She enjoys typical teenage pursuits like shopping in malls with her friends. And just like any 15-year-old, her mom has put a limit on how late she can stay out at night.
I just got a curfew of 12 o'clock. 12, can you imagine 12? What can you do until 12? But no, I have curfews, and me and my mom were constantly arguing. I say, when I was in Paris, I can just walk out of the house and go where I wanted to. She's like, well, you're not in Paris now, you're at home, and you better be in the house at 10 o'clock at night or 11:30 or 12, whatever time. So I definitely have curfews, and who are you going out with tonight, and what's their phone number, leave it on the table, and oh yeah.
And so they went to scout, junior high kids, especially if you were tall and pretty and things like that. You had 13-year-olds being flown internationally with very little supervision to go, quote unquote, model in Milan and in Paris and things like that.
Were the other models nice?
Rarely were they nice. They were terrible. When I went to Chanel, the first person that Karl Lagerfeld put me with was Naomi Campbell. And he was like, here's another girl who's left, her mom early. I think if I was 13, Naomi was probably like maybe 19, 20, something like that.
Were the other models nice?
Rarely were they nice. They were terrible. Not Naomi, but it was terrible. They were terrible.
How did you deal with that at 13 years old?
I think I was just kind of young, and I think I was a little bit naive, and I think I just kind of ignored it. I don't know. They were older than me, so they kind of seemed like old and bitter. And that's a reason, like, now to this day, I will never be mean to like a young girl or a young model or an aspiring, hopeful something. Or I would never be that, you know, ex-wife that like, you can come home with a 20-year-old. I don't have anything to say about that. Not home to my home, but you can go to your home. And I'm not going to be like dogging her because she's 20. I won't do that because I was that girl.
The 2000s, modeling was heavily glamorized. Shows like this and many others taught young girls that it was okay to star themselves, to compete, to be sexual, and to be available. Meanwhile, high fashion and entertainment overlapped consistently. Celebrities dated models, executives attended shows, modeling became a pipeline into the celebrity culture and sometimes into darker spaces. Was every model trafficked? Of course not. But the environment was ripe for exploitation. We can't forget that.
No wonder Karen Mulder disappeared at her peak. After the Epstein case, her past ordeal is being re-examined. In the 1990s, Karen was one of the world's highest paid Big Five supermodels, earning as much as £10,000 a day at her peak. But in 2001, she appeared on a French talk show and publicly said that she had been sexually abused by several powerful men. According to media reports at the time, the footage from the show was later destroyed. After that, her family and her agency had her committed to a psychiatric hospital, citing a mental breakdown and drug abuse. Ironically, her hospital bills were paid by one of the men she accused, Gerald Marie, then the president of Elite Model Management. After speaking out, Karen completely lost her career. In 2002, she attempted suicide. Although she survived, she disappeared from the fashion world afterward. While her accusations did not directly mention Epstein, what she described bears similarities to the power structures later exposed within the modeling industry. One of the key figures she accused, Gerald Marie, was a friend of Epstein, and, after the Epstein case came to light, was also accused by multiple models of being involved in systematic abuse. In later years, Karen focused her life entirely on her daughter, Cassia. Becoming a mother became a key source of strength in her recovery from the psychological trauma she experienced earlier in her life.
Teenage girls watching the whole modeling industry from the outside looking in, they started normalizing that beauty equals access, access equated power, and sexuality equates currency. And this is why we're not having this scandal with America's Next Top Model, because people are looking at it with fresher eyes. A lot of people were willing to do anything to get on television, to get that contract. And Tyra and the producers and the judges knew this, and they were willing to exploit that vulnerability. So let me segue a bit from America's Next Top Model and talk about Victoria's Secret specifically, which Tyra also modeled for. Let's not forget who owned both Victoria's Secrets and the Limited Too. It was owned by billionaire Les Wexner. Victoria's Secret's whole narrative was sexy as confidence. This was sexy being marketed towards allegedly adult women, but that wasn't the fact. When you went into any Victoria's Secrets at any given day, you would see teenagers in there. I know as a teenager, we shopped at Victoria's Secrets all the time. And then on top of that, he owned the Limited Too, which was for tween girls. But it didn't stop there. He also owned the Limited, which was for older teen girls, and Abercrombie and Fitch. And I also find it very interesting that one of the biggest songs around the early 2000s was a song by LFO, and they made clear to say, I love girls that wear Abercrombie and Fitch. I don't believe in coincidences. That song alone made us go and buy something from Abercrombie and Fitch, which we're now finding out was owned by Les Wexner.
I like girls that wear Abercrombie and Fitch.
So it's very interesting to find out how Les Wexner really played a role in a lot of these stores and the whole modeling industry. Not only did he own the Limited Too, Abercrombie & Fitch, Victoria's Secrets, they also used this as a pipeline to not only procure girls through the modeling pipeline for Jeffrey Epstein, but to also procure young men for the CEO, Mike Jeffries of Abercrombie & Fitch. So this whole modeling pipeline not only affected young girls, but also young men as well. And this girl in this TikTok video breaks it down succinctly. So go ahead and check this out.
All right, so you guys have heard that the CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch was arrested on trafficking charges. That's this guy right here, Mike Jeffries. I'm about to tell you how that ties into Victoria's Secret, Epstein, Ashton Kutcher, all of it. So to start connecting these dots, we have to start at the very beginning, which is with this guy, Les Wexner. Now in 1988, Les Wexner, who owns Victoria's Secret, goes and buys Abercrombie & Fitch. And in 1992, Les installs this guy, Mike Jeffries, as the CEO of Abercrombie. Now, this is the guy who was just arrested for trafficking. And the reason that it's interesting that this guy, Les, bought Abercrombie and Fitch and appointed this guy to be ahead of it, who is now being charged with trafficking, is because he made Jeffrey Epstein power of attorney for him. And that is a weird thing, I think, because giving somebody power of attorney is like when one of your family member gets older and a son or a daughter will take over control of their wealth and their finances and start making decisions for them. So this is who this guy chose to be his power of attorney. And just to take it a step farther here, in 2011, this guy gave his New York mansion, the famous New York mansion, to Jeffrey Epstein. You know, the mansion that was bugged in every single room and had a lot of famous artwork in it. That famous mansion was transferred from this guy to him in 2011 for $0. And Epstein's estate sold that mansion for $51 million in 2021. Now the story continues to get crazier. I'm about to bring some new characters in, but before I say more, please do all the things just in an effort for this not to be suppressed. A lot of the things I'm talking about and the people I'm mentioning are sometimes not seen as much as they should be, so if you don't mind, do all the things. But anyway, so this guy, Mike Jeffries, the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, who was installed in that company by Les Wexner, was also arrested with his boyfriend and one of their recruiters. Now, his recruiter, James Jacobson, is quite a character. He has no nose but covers it with a snakeskin flap.
He chose to wear a snakeskin patch where his nose once was.
According to this indictment, that recruiter, James Jacobson, was employed by Michael Jeffries and Matthew Smith to recruit, interview, and hire men to perform acts. It goes on to say that he traveled throughout the United States and internationally to recruit and interview men for these events. During the tryouts of potential candidates, Jacobson typically required those candidates to engage with acts with him first. Following the tryout by Jacobson, Smith would approve candidates prior to their selection for and transportation to these events. Now, the victims of this alleged recruiter were young men who were led to believe that participating in these acts would mean modeling opportunities within the retail company and that not complying could harm their careers. What he was doing here in America, which he was arrested in the Midwest and he got out on a $500,000 bond. This guy got his $10 million bond posted. Anyway, what he was allegedly doing here, recruiting, sounds a lot like this guy was doing, Jean-Luc Burnell, who was held on the suspicion of supplying girls to Mr. You-Know-Who, and he suspiciously was found in a jail cell unalived the exact same way that this guy was. Burnell founded a modeling company called MC2 Models, which was allegedly used as a recruiting company for Mr. Epstein and was financed by him, allegedly. According to Business Insider, some of the biggest celebs who did modeling for Abercrombie and Fitch were Taylor Swift and Jennifer Lawrence. Guess who else was a model for Abercrombie and Fitch? Of course, Mr. Ashton Kutcher himself was an Abercrombie boy. Apparently, he won a Freshest Faces of Iowa contest in 1997. And that's how he started his modeling career. Now, I just want to wrap this all up by showing you guys a very short clip that has mostly been scrubbed from the internet. It's from Jeffrey Epstein's deposition, and it's of them asking him if he had a relationship with this guy, Les Wexner, the guy who installed him at Abercrombie. Now, I'm just telling you guys what I know. You guys put it all together and let me know what you think. Roll the clip.
Do you consider yourself to be bisexual? No. Okay. In any event, you did develop a sexual relationship with Leslie Wexner at some point in time. Is that true? No.
He used a lot of these models to bait young girls. Because think about it, if somebody like Naomi Campbell, who is a well-known model, comes up to you and says, you have what it takes, let me introduce you to some of my friends, we can get you in the industry. Most girls, especially if you're young, you're not going to think twice. And so when you think about who owns Victoria's Secrets and the access that he had with these models to lure other young girls, it's very chilling when you think about how deep that rabbit hole gets.
Hi. How many times have you done this? Have you walked in front of these stores and you go in and you get their emails and you respond to it every time they have some special sale that appears to be almost every week? And then I found out something.
Here, we know of approximately over $1 billion, it looks like. It's about $1 billion that was either transferred, provided in stocks, or given directly to Mr. Epstein by Wexner. Now, it's important to note that Mr. Wexner appears to be unaware of much of the money, as he claims, that was given over to Mr. Epstein. In fact, it's interesting that Mr. Wexner has already begun to clarify in his mind that somehow he and Mr. Epstein weren't even friends. We should be very clear that the two were very close, per reporting. They spent a lot of time together. Mr. Wexner admitted that he traveled to both Epstein's island as well as his other properties. Mr. Wexner also admitted that Jeffrey Epstein had access to a lot of Mr. Wexner's wealth. And when asked even simple questions, even as it relates to Mr. Epstein being the co-president of the foundation that established the area that we're in today, Mr. Wexner had little to say. In fact, it's clear that Mr. Wexner is trying to downplay how close Jeffrey Epstein and Mr. Wexner actually were. And we should be very clear that there would be no Epstein Island, there would be no Epstein plane, there would be no money to traffic women and girls. Mr. Epstein would not be the wealthy man he was without the support of Les Wexner.
Limited to Justice Clothing. That ownership came from Les Wexner, who owns everything. Everything, including Victoria's Secret. Les Wexner gave Jeffrey Epstein this corporation. But why?
So now let's hit on the Nickelodeon Disney era. So recently, in the past few years, there have been documentaries and interviews which have revealed really disturbing behind-the-scenes behavior on children's television. There was a documentary that we all watched about a year ago called Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV. And it exposed misconduct, an unsafe environment for young actors. Former child stars have spoken out about abuse, manipulation, inappropriate conduct from executives.
How safe can any kids be in that environment? There would be even bigger problems down the line with actual pedophiles on set.
These are 3 predators who worked at Nickelodeon, all in a short amount of time.
Hey guys, we're ready for you.
It was a toxic environment. It made me trust people less.
We were there for so many hours. You get comfortable with people until you're not. I had no idea what I was saving my son from. It was a house of horrors. They find this enormous trove of child pornography.
The officer said we found Ziploc bags, each one with a girl's name on it.
11 charges of child sexual abuse related to a child actor.
It made me wonder who was being hurt.
I've been waiting 17 years for today.
Also, let's not forget the long-standing allegations surrounding young actors in Hollywood, like Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, and many others. They were not treated like children. They were treated as a product. They were treated as a brand. And most unfortunately, they were treated as commodity to be passed around the industry. So a lot of young people who were not able to have their own voice, who didn't have their own say, went through a lot of things in this industry just to keep us, the public, entertained. After school, we would run home to watch 106 in Park and TRL. Also around the 2000s, enters in the club scene. You start seeing the club scene in a lot of, movies like Honey, Save the Last Dance, and things like that. And the clubs were everything back then. You also saw the club scenes in plenty of music videos, and everything was very sexual and sensual. Let's also not forget, at night we also had BET Uncut. They weren't having sex, but it was very, very risque. That's why it was called BET Uncut. These videos glamorized stripping as empowerment. Even the shoes that we wore to the club. You know, a lot of us wore platform shoes. Well, not like the ones in the 70s with the big chunky heels. They were the ones with the platform in the front and the skinny high heels in the back. And when you look at those, I remember when I was young and I would wear them, all the adults in my life would be like, why are you wearing them stripper shoes? Those are stripper shoes. And I'm like, no, this is a style. I got these from Debs. I got these at Rainbows. But looking at these shoes, I still own several pair. They do look like stripper shoes. There's really no difference between these shoes that were sold at random stores like Rainbow and Debs and the stripper shoes that you see in the strip club. So once again, this was all part of that hypersexualization of young people because these shoes made us taller. So it made us feel and look a little bit older, right? Because if you can go from being 5'6" to 5'11", nobody's going to really assume that you're 13, 14. And they made you feel sexy. They made you feel grown up. You know, these weren't little girl flat shoes. These were grown women's shoes. So it's very interesting, even looking back at the fashion, how even the shoes mirrored stripper culture. And that's the part that makes people uncomfortable because, again, was this random or was this cultural engineering? The entertainment industry is controlled by powerful executives. The media shapes the norms shape the behavior, and if you want to destabilize a generation, you don't attack them directly. You normalize dysfunction slowly. You hypersexualize the children. You reward scandal. You mock modesty. You push consumption and confuse empowerment with exposure. And 20 years later, we're all sitting here trying to unpack our trauma and trying to figure out where all of this came from. And this was a slow process. We're basically frogs sitting in a boiling pot of water and we never realized it until it was too late to jump out the fire.
What is going on in this house? What kind of weird sexual situation are we in? So Matt's in there praying for his life to be over while David's servicing the hose. Jamie's passed out in Danny's bed. Kelly comes home with Peter. They go to bed in their room. So next I get another psst. Yo, Melissa. What? I'm thinking I'm seeing Jesus and my days are through. It's just long-haired Julie. What do you want?
My boss, I guess maybe I'm not as assertive as I should be. I feel pretty uncomfortable with him because he's making certain comments to me that let me know that if I wanted to take it there, I could, and I don't feel comfortable saying, I want you to leave me alone, get your hands off me, and maybe that's what needs to be said.
Okay, so I'm watching Real World Las Vegas, well, rewatching it because I watched it when I was like maybe 13. And Mark is the manager of all the roommates. And he is now going into Arissa's bed. Arissa was asleep.
So,
what are you going to do? Jump up and beat me up?
Proceeds to lift up my comforter and slide into my bed. Do I be naked? Why are you in my bed if I say I'm naked? Don't come in.
And he's been trying to hook up with Caroline. He's trying to hook up with anyone. See what he just said? Is that how you talk? Is that any way to talk to your boss? And I'm just like, how did this stuff air back in the day? And we just didn't, I guess we just didn't know like any better because this could never air on TV now. I'm sure it's still happening now with managers taking it way too far, being super inappropriate and abusing their power. But the fact that this aired on MTV, which was like everything at that time. If you're young, you might not realize it, but MTV was like the shit. Like everything was on MTV. And the fact that this was on TV with their manager going into their beds, like abusing his power, and we just had no clue is crazy to me.
Another interesting thing that I tie back to Victoria's Secrets and Wexner is that back in 1999, Cisco dropped Thong Song.
This thing right here is letting all the ladies know.
And this wasn't just a hit record. This was a cultural shift, okay? When I tell you Thong Song was everywhere. And when you think about that, thongs were a niche back then, mainly for adults. You might see thongs in a strip club. But after that song became popular, everybody wanted thongs, myself included, child. Before then, everybody just wore normal panties. But once that came out, everybody wanted thongs. And so what ended up happening is we had this phenomenon called the whale tail. And the whale tail became very trendy. And it was in all the teen magazines. Low-rise jeans made it even more popular. And so what the whale tail was is you wore low-rise jeans and you had a little bit of your thong hanging out. And I remember everybody dressed like that to the club. It was cool to see a piece of your underwear. Whereas before, you didn't want people seeing your underwear. But when that song came out, it shaped everything. And before, you mainly saw thongs at like places like Victoria's Secrets or Fredericks of Hollywood. That was another really popular store. That was Victoria's Secret's competition. But then after that, you started seeing thongs at Macy's, JCPenney's, Kohl's, at like just regular local stores were selling thongs like crazy. So again, that was another hypersexual aesthetic that was placed on young women. Another thing that came in around that time was the whole tramp stamp era. And it's so funny that, this generation calls it tramp stamps. I mean, we just called it lower back tattoos. But yeah, I too have a tramp stamp. It is what it is, okay? It's cute, okay? So around that time, when you think about it, lower back tattoos exploded. You had the whale tail, people showing off their thongs. You had low-rise jeans. And celebrities like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and so many others made this look very aspirational. It was marketed as feminine, easy to hide, sexy but classy, curve-enhancing. And because low-rise jeans dominated fashion, your lower back area was constantly exposed. So visually, yes, you had the thong, you had the lower back tattoo. It became a paired aesthetic for a lot of young people. The fashion industry basically exposed that zone. Tattoos decorated that zone. Music videos glorified the zone. And the retail industry profited off of that zone. That ecosystem of influence kept a lot of folks paid off of young people. Tattoo artists, singers, the lingerie makers, the people who made the jeans. So a lot of people were eating off of the aesthetic and off of the bodies of young women. Another thing that drove a lot of the hypersexual wave that took place back then, you had Maxim and FHM magazine culture. That was more with the white folks. In the black community, we had Smooth, we had King magazine, we had Black Men magazine, and it had all of our favorite video vixens on the covers. Even had some of the America's Next Top Model winners on the covers as well. So a lot of these very sexual, sensual magazines that were geared towards men featured young women on the cover. I mean, it was like every young girl's dream, if you were in modeling, to get on FHM or Maxim or Smooth or King magazine. These were, those magazines were a big deal, especially to get a cover was just insane back in the day. And we also became very much obsessed with tabloids. Celebrity news, celebrity gossip. We wanted to know everything Britney Spears was involved in. What was going on with Paris Hilton and, Nikki Hilton and Kim Kardashian and Lindsay Lohan. So that was another thing that helped that wave, is that whatever these girls were doing, a lot of young girls were interested in following and mirroring their lifestyles. Capitalism, shock value, and sex is always going to sell. And that messaging was sold as empowerment to a lot of young people. It told them that your body equals power, visibility equals confidence, sex appeal equals currency. But was it really empowerment? What was empowering about it? Was it because of the male gaze? Getting attention from men and young boys? Where did the empowerment come from? And it's so funny how a lot of us millennials, and, Gen Xers can kind of all say the same thing. A lot of us had tramp stamps. A lot of us rock low-rise jeans. A lot of us remember the whale tail. We shopped at Victoria's Secrets. And when you look back on it, it kind of feels like it was coordinated. All of this just didn't happen by happenstance. Another part of the conversation that people are finally starting to unpack is the role that major retail brands played in shaping how young women viewed themselves. For years, both Victoria's Secrets and Bath & Body Works, who are both owned by Lex Wexner through the L brands, these stores weren't just selling lotions, perfumes, and lingerie. They were literally selling an entire identity. Young girls were being socialized into a very specific idea of femininity, how you should smell, how you should look, and even how desirable you should be. And when you look back at the actual product names, like I stated before my live stream, it becomes real interesting. These fragrances were not just given normal cutesy names. They were given names like Pure Seduction, Strawberries and Champagne, Vanilla Lace, Endless Love, Passionate Kisses, Amber Romance, Pear Glace, Sweet Charms, My Desire, Secret Crush, and the most iconic of them all is Love Spell. And when I tell you I owned every last one of these, I did, okay? And even the sweeter sounding ones like Enchanted Apple carried a dreamy romantic undertone. And let's not forget that apples tend to be used in love spells. When people are doing magic, they tend to use apples. Remember in Snow White, she bit the apple and it had to be a prince that kissed her that brought her back to life. There's many love spells that people do in witchcraft, but one of them is called an apple binding. And it's where they use an apple and they make it enchanted by using different ingredients and fragrances, and they bury it or they put candles in them. So now that I'm older, the name Enchanted Apple definitely strikes me as odd, and it reminds me of like Snow White, you know, the poison apple and the prince having to come and save her. So when you step back and think about it, the language itself is very telling. Let's not forget words have power. The power over the tongue is a real thing. So this branding wasn't just random. These names were used to invoke seduction, enchantment, and romantic binding. So in a symbolic way, young women were being introduced to the idea that their power or their value was tied to attraction and desirability. The message was subtle but consistent. Be alluring, be enchanting, be irresistible. And now years later, a lot of women are looking back at this era with fresh eyes. Recently, Stephanie McNeil, who's a writer and former editor at Glamour magazine, she sparked a viral conversation online when she reflected on how deeply these brands were embedded into millennial girlhood. She wrote that at 9 years old, all she wanted was clothes from the Limited Too. By 12, she wanted glitter lotion from Bath & Body Works. And by 16, it was bras from Victoria's Secrets and shorts from Pink. On the surface, these were just normal mall brands. But when you zoom out and you look at the big picture, many women are realizing that their coming of age years were shaped by an entire commercial ecosystem that blurred the lines between childhood and adult sexuality. And a lot of the responses to Stephanie were very eye-opening, and I'm going to read some of these responses to you guys now. So Stephanie also says, does anyone remember shaming if you weren't wearing a thong? Another person says, suddenly the 2000s beauty standards and the reunification of Britney, Lindsay, Paris, and Amanda Bynes becomes much more sinister than it already was. Another person says, learning about Lex Wexner being an Epstein conspirator makes me feel like even our good memories of millennial girlhood were stolen from us, because now it's like it wasn't just glittery, colorful, and fun, flirty teen identity development. It was grooming, and we're all paying for it. Another person says, I remember having a screaming fight with my 14-year-old daughter in the mall, telling her she didn't need Victoria's Secret's lingerie and a $40 push-up bra. It's crazy to me how we as Gen X girls were raised by feminists burning bras to our daughters being sold this overpriced sexy Lovelyti stuff, and all of their friends were doing it, so it's really hard to fight the peer pressure. Another person says, and the men were constantly telling us, you're so mature for your age, you're not like the other girls, you're an old soul. Last but not least, this woman says, girl, I got scouted to model at age 15 in the 90s. I always thought I had missed a huge opportunity by not going for it. Now I realize that it was probably the best decision I ever made. So what makes this whole conversation that a lot of people are having online even more unsettling is that for many people is the growing awareness of the connection between Lex Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein, and this went on for decades. Wes Wexner built a retail empire that defined the aesthetics of millennial girlhood, and at the same time, Jeffrey Epstein operated in elite circles connected to the same world of power, wealth, and influence. For many women, realizing that overlap has forced them to reevaluate what once felt like an innocent part of their teenage years now feels a lot darker. So now you have a lot of millennials and younger Gen X women revisiting the 90s and early 2000s and asking a lot of difficult questions. Were we simply consumers, or were we being carefully marketed into a hypersexualized identity long before we were even old enough to understand it? Because if you really examine that era, the lingerie marketing, the sexy but young aesthetic, the pressure to wear thongs, the push-up bras for teenagers, even the fragrance names were centered around seduction and enchantment. It paints a picture of an entire industry that knew exactly what they were doing. So looking back on it, why did it all feel so coordinated? When you think about it, music videos inspire fashion. Fashion sells at the mall. And we shopped at places like Deb's, Charlotte Russe, that were really big into club wear at the time. And then on top of that, magazines. Like I said, magazines validate the look. And reality TV normalized it for a lot of us, and celebrities amplified it. So I believe that's why so much of this stuff feels very much engineered.
I'm a conspiracy theorist, but this one is not a theory anymore. Project MK Ultra is real and not just something you see on TV. According to a released document, the CIA ran secret mind control experiments in the 1950s and 1960s called Project Artichoke, which later morphed into MK Ultra. They discussed drugging people through everyday items like food, water, Coca-Cola, beer, liquor, cigarettes to produce different behaviors. Later on, this morphed into MK Ultra, which is used to program people to become CIA mind control assets, which is symbolized by the monarch butterfly. Most, if not all, celebrities have been MK Ultra'd. The training creates different personalities called alters, and here is a clip of Britney Spears where it appears that something triggers one of her switches and a different personality emerges.
You've had a year that would test a lot of people.
It was pretty rough. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness. Hello. Ew. Strong Britney. Yeah, it was a weird.
You need to understand that certain words, symbols, and hand gestures are used to trigger switches and maintain control over the MK Ultra victim. Mind control used to sound crazy until the documents were declassified. The real question isn't, did they do it? It's, what would stop them now? But what do I know? I'm just a conspiracy theorist. Let me know what you think.
So let's also not forget reality television. That really exploded in the 2000s as well. We had shows like The Real World, Flavor of Love, America's Next Top Model, The Simple Life, Laguna Beach. We had so many shows back then. We had shows for Black folks like Baldwin Hills. We also had College Hill. That was a crazy series back in the 2000s as well. And what reality TV did differently is that music videos were sold as a fantasy, but reality TV made it feel obtainable. Instead of pop stars in a choreographed music video, it became regular girls partying in low-rise jeans and platform heels. It blurred the line between celebrity and everyday people, and that's where the shift became huge. You saw a lot of hypersexualization become normalized as normal girl behavior on reality television.
Oh, it feel like the concrete is like breaking, like pow, pow, pow.
Reality shows like America's Next Top Model critique girls' bodies weekly. They taught girls how to pose, and the poses were always emphasizing the hips and the legs. They reinforced being tall and thin as the standard of beauty. They also framed sexual confidence as professional power. So once again, you had that ecosystem effect taking place. Reality TV figured out early that if you optimized it, you can win big. Shock sells, sex sells, drama sells, and youth sells.
Stop me up with that. I look at get all the hands on your last
Once the network saw rating spikes from controversy and sexual imagery, and this is why we have so many reality TV shows till this day. They don't even like putting money into scripted shows anymore because it's easier and cheaper to film a reality TV show and create a bunch of drama and, manipulate people. So one thing I want to say before I go is that this is not to shame anybody. A lot of us were unaware of what was going on, what was taking place back then. I'm not here to make women feel bad about tramp stamps and, low-rise jeans, because like I said, I have the same thing. But I want us to understand that we were kids and we absorbed what we were given. And the point is that now that we're grown and we have access to information and we can see the patterns, we owe it to not only ourselves, but the younger girls coming up behind us to call it what it is.
What I want to know is how this even got aired on TV.
At the tender age of 10, Britney was already using her budding sexuality to attract an audience. When the Star Search cameras turned on, Britney was transformed, pouring on a sexy southern charm the judges had never seen in a package so small.
In 2006, VH1 released a 1-hour documentary special called Britney's Secret Childhood. It was framed as a look into Britney Spears' early life and how she became famous so young. But instead of just telling her story, the documentary talks about her in a way that's deeply inappropriate, focusing on how she looked and how people perceived her, even though she was just a child. Look at this.
She comes out in a very provocative gown with high heels, and all of a sudden that little girl knocks you right off your ass.
There is nothing more interesting to adult men than the development of an adolescent female. We are hardwired to recognize that.
Britney was 10 years old. She was dressed like a normal kid, standing on the stage, singing and doing something she genuinely loved. And yet grown adults were sitting there saying things that should have never even been thought, let alone broadcast on national television. And this wasn't just one bad documentary. This was a pattern. It reflects how the entertainment industry treated Britney for years, and then blaming her and making fun of her later when the damage became too much. The public watched it happen and consumed it as entertainment. Looking back now, it's hard not to see how badly she was failed. Let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments.
This was a cultural ecosystem that was built around sexual consumption of young female bodies that was profitable, persuasive, and protected by the same industry that claimed to be empowering us. Like I always say, different year, different format, same story. Until we name it clearly, it's just going to keep happening under new branding. And that's why we have all the dysfunction and the craziness that we see on social media. All the stuff that we see on social media didn't appear out of anywhere. Everything from the 90s and the 2000s laid the groundwork to what we're seeing now in 2026. And I think the most eerie part about that is when going through the Epstein emails, you see how much of a hand they played in pop culture. You see how many things they controlled behind the scenes that had to do with pop culture. Everything from cryptocurrency to Call of Duty.
So apparently this guy is one of the reasons we even have microtransactions in Call of Duty. And yes, the reason they're called CP too. As if ruining the lives of the kids he took to his island wasn't enough, he somehow found a way to mess with kids all over the world just trying to play Call of Duty. Truly unreal. Emails that came out show that Jeffrey Epstein's advisors were talking to former Activision CEO Bobby Kotick as early as 2013 about microtransactions in Call of Duty. And the wild part? They could have picked any word that means currency, but they landed on one that abbreviates to CP. You really can't make that up. Honestly, it's not shocking that Kotick's name is in this mess. For years, he allegedly knew about the harassment and abuse issues at Blizzard and chose to ignore them. It gets even stranger. In 2018, Epstein's advisors reportedly told him to buy Activision Blizzard stock ahead of Black Ops 4 because they believed Blackout would be a hit. Apparently, Epstein himself was a huge Black Ops 4 player and was all in on Blackout, ride or die. At this point, you could almost jokingly label any developer who pushes aggressive microtransactions as an Epstein disciple. Dark humor, sure, but the connections are still disturbing.
In recently released email threads and documents, it basically shows that this was not some type of cartoon supervillain conspiracy. It's not a secret bunker running pop music, but a mindset, a worldview, a group of ultra-rich individuals openly discussing culture as leverage. In private correspondences, you can see where Jeffrey Epstein and other elites were having conversations about why the American working class wasn't rioting in the way citizens of other countries were. They also talked about consumerism. Let's not forget that he went out of his way to basically to create microtransactions in video games like Call of Duty. On top of that, he spoke a lot about celebrity culture. This is how powerful people talk when they think no one is listening. The emails show networking across politics, tech, academia, media, and finance. And this includes both the left and the right, liberal and conservative. They were all at the same dinner tables. They were all in the same inboxes. Figures from the presidential administration to Silicon Valley founders to university intellectuals to art market players and even media personalities were all at the center of all of these exchanges. So when you zoom out, you start to see the bigger picture. Pop culture isn't just entertainment. It's economic fuel, it's social glue, and it's an emotional aesthetic. Super Bowl ads, award shows, viral controversies, luxury fashions, crypto hype, celebrity scandals. It's all part of the feedback loop that keeps us scrolling, arguing, and aspiring. Meanwhile, the wealthy consolidate quietly and sit back and pull the puppet strings. If culture keeps the public entertained and divided or dreaming, then the system stays intact.
It's not a coincidence that after second wave feminism, this body type was not in style anymore. And they used child models like Brooke Shields to set their agenda. PDF beauty standards. This is not a coincidence. Women were getting too powerful.
People will see you as a sex kitten.
I was in love with her before I met her. How do you work with a Brooke Shield who is just barely, not quite 16, a youngster this age, and about a certain...
Well, it's going to be tough for me to walk away from you thinking of you as just a regular kid, I'm telling you.
She's got a beautiful face, she has beautiful hair, eyes, nose, mouth, and a beautiful body. I mean, she's incredible.
From the beginning of advertisement, the ideal female body was curvy, often voluptuous. She was sexualized, but this was an adult female sexuality. Then we see Roe v. Wade. We see second wave feminism. We see women getting more confidence, authority. We see them getting rights. And this is exactly when they started pushing this and normalizing it. Because women's empowerment is a direct threat to this pedophilic and corrupt system. No, you're not going to be traditional for men anymore. Powerless, submissive, independent. We're going to replace you with little girls. Because women who have come into their own and truly understand their power, that's so dangerous for the patriarchy. That's why they try to normalize this. It's disgusting, pedophilic, and sick system to keep women down. They're afraid of what would happen if you knew how powerful you are.
So I asked you guys at the beginning of this video, do you feel like we were groomed by pop culture and by all the things that we grew up watching? But I think a better question is this. Who benefited from the culture that became a distraction? The 90s and the 2000s weren't just about nostalgia. They were also about profitability, they were about distraction, and they were about creating a spectacle. And when I tie what was going on in the 90s and 2000s to some of these private inbox conversations by some of the most powerful people in the world talking about pop culture in these exact terms, at that point I can't just call it a conspiracy. It's simply about power protecting itself. And once you understand that, you'll start seeing the world in a whole different lens.
Want the latest news in the streets? Join us and tune in for the tea. Breaking news with integrity. So tell your friends and your family. It's the Lovelyti TV show, bringing you good tea and good vibes. It's the Lovelyti TV show. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe.